So as you all know, I am not with you today because I'm traveling back to Medellin. So send good vibes that they let me back into the country. Excuse me. And I apologize. I'm sorry I know this hasn't been the best start to the new semester. With everything that's been going on in my life, but I am excited to be able to be with you guys every day that we have class from this point forward. However, today is an asynchronous class, and so I just am going to give you a little bit of notes, just one slide to recap what we left off when we had class on Wednesday. We began talking about this idea of empathy, and one thing that I noted in our classes, and you'll see it underlined here, is that empathy by definition is a process. When we talk about the word process, that means it's something that doesn't happen just at once. There's multiple steps or it's continuous. So this idea of empathy isn't something that can just happen, but it's this ongoing, continuous work of understanding and attempting to identify with the feelings and experiences of another. So we took that idea and we actually then married it to the concept of empathy mapping, which comes from this idea of design thinking. Design thinking is a skill and a process of innovation, and empathy mapping is the process of getting into the user's head. It's a design thinking strategy that says, if I'm the designer, I'm making something. Before I make it, I have to try to be who the user is, sort of a method acting like we talked about in class on Wednesday. Who is my user? What do they feel? What do they say? What do they think? What are their values? How do they spend their days? And how might that information inform the design of my product? So this is really important, particularly in the work of empathy and innovation for social change, because it challenges this binary idea. And we learned about binary thinking and some of the limitations of binary thinking last semester. But it challenges this idea that people are just good or bad, or people are skilled or unskilled, or people are either motivated or lazy. They're not one or the other. People are complex. Their realities are complex. Empathy mapping asks us as innovators to really seek to understand those complex realities, those deeper realities that people live every day, to understand instead of just make decisions based on our simplistic thinking about how they live or what their situations are. And so that's a really, really crucial for us as we think about getting closer to designing our innovation for social change projects, that we don't want to view communities or people groups as a binary. We want to understand their complexities, and empathy mapping is going to help us do that. When we think about empathy mapping, it's not just a skill for social change, it's a skill for any type of innovation. Empathy mapping is used, in Google, and Google has a whole group of people whose job is to understand the people who use Gmail, the people who use Google Calendar. What are their priorities? How do they function? And what are their needs? And how can Google meet those needs? Apple actually has a design thinking component of their company, of their organization. So there are folks who work for Apple whose primary full-time job is design thinking, and empathy mapping comes from design thinking. So when Apple releases a new update or an upgraded version of the iPhone, there's a whole group of people who has worked to understand Apple users, understand, again, like I said, how they spend their days. What are the things that they say? What are their feelings? What are their values? And how can those values and feelings be captured in these products? Similarly to even applications and apps that we use on our phone, right? People who are behind the scenes developing apps like TikTok have to think, in order for this to be successful, how do I make it meet the needs of my target demographic? The teenagers who are using TikTok, who are those teenagers? How do they function? What do they feel? What are their worries? What are their concerns? And how might I capture that in my application? And so that's what we're moving towards. And our goal is, because after this skill development and learning around empathy, we're moving straight into you designing your ISC. And I know you probably have questions around, what that is, what that means, what that might look like. We have a lot of information still to give you, because the ISC will be a little bit different this year. But we are doing everything possible as a team, me, Julian, Camilo, Juan David, to make sure that your ISC is still relevant and meaningful even in COVID times. And you'll be getting that information in later classes. Right now, we're focusing on this skill of empathy mapping because, as you see on the screen now, it's going to be so useful in our innovative practices. So for today's practice, you're going to work in groups. You may choose your partner, send them a WhatsApp right now. Are you watching a Lisa video? Do you want to work together? You may work in groups of 3. You guys can set up a Zoom and the 3 of you can work together. And you're going to be doing an activity in small groups called Empathizing with a Villain. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You are going to pick a villain. It can be Cinderella's stepmother. It can be the Joker. It can be Scar from The Lion King. It can be from a cool comic book or TV show that I'm not cool enough to know about, but you guys are. And you're going to describe to me a bit about who that villain is. So again, this is group work. So you're going to submit one per group. So if right now in class, or right now as you watch this video, you're texting your friends who don't want to work with, one of you needs to access the document, make a copy of it, and share it with the other members once you're in, once you've connected in other Zooms or however you want to work. This says breakout rooms because this class was supposed to be live. Anyways, you're going to pick your villain and then you're going to get to it. You're going to empathy map. You know, you're going to tell me what are some of the quotes or famous sayings? What are some of the things that people say about him or her? Based on how they act, based on the things that they do, what would you infer about the villain's values or beliefs? What are their morals? What's important to them? You know, what are some of the things that guide their thinking? When you look at their villain, what are some of the major actions that define them? What are the events in their past? Maybe you know some events about their past that are important to note here. And then kind of try to get into their heart space. What are they feeling? What are their primary emotions? You know, what is Scar feeling as the second brother in The Lion King? Well, you know, what are some of the feelings that resonate with him? And then what you're going to be doing to finalize this activity is looking at this map and discussing together, okay, so maybe we don't have to defeat the villain. Maybe we can rewrite the story. And that's what you're doing for this activity. You're either rewriting the story or maybe you're like doing a sequel. Maybe you're writing the sequel to Cinderella and what happens after she goes off and marries the prince. And you're empathizing with the stepmother and you're crafting a solution. And this should be a detailed solution because remember, empathy is a process. So it should contain at least 2 or 3 steps that clearly connect to the empathy map. Your goal in crafting this solution is to use unlimited creativity and tell me how the empathy map has informed what you would do instead of defeating this villain, changing the experience. How might the story end differently? Or how might there be a sequel that allows the villain and the protagonist to connect in a different way? That allows the villain to change, to be a different person. Your solution has at least 3 detailed steps, and those steps should be connected directly to the empathy map, right? So you're going to say, you know, one thing that might happen is Cinderella and the stepmother are going to start having Friday night dinners after she gets married to the prince. At these dinners, they are going to do X, Y, and Z. This is important because in the empathy map, you'll see that. And so what you're doing, again, like I said, is telling me some different things that you would do to change the villain because of your understanding of them through empathy mapping. All right. So again, step 1, pick your villain. What makes them a villain? Tell me a little bit about them. Step 2, empathy map them. Get into their heads. Method act. What do they say? What do they think? What do they feel? What do they do? What are some of the actions that mark their past? Step 3, solutions build. Innovate and change their reality. How might their story be different? Or how might there be a part 2 to their story that looks different than just beating them or defeating them, but actually looks like the villain changing, the protagonist and the villain coming together? What might that look like based on empathy mapping? I will be on the plane while you guys are in class, so I can't say email me and I'll respond to questions because I might not be able to. But if you get really stuck, email me and I will be catching up on email as soon as I land. This isn't due until Monday, so ideally you finish it in class. But if you get stuck on a point and you need the weekend to finish it, you just shoot me an email. But I'll have the due date set up for Monday. But the goal is that you can knock this out in class. All right? Thanks for understanding, folks. Again, I'm so sorry to miss your class, but I will see you all next week.